our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
One Sabbath, Jesus and his disciples were going through the grain fields. And as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God, where Abiathar was high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. And he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Humanity is Lord, even on the Sabbath.' Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Come forward.' And then he said to them, 'Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?' But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
In the name of the one holy and living God, amen. Well, it's only the end of chapter 2 of Mark's gospel, and they already want to destroy him. Earlier in chapter 1, the Pharisees and others had seen things he was doing and heard things that he'd said, and they considered it blasphemy. But it's now, this is kind of the first time that they're done with him. They don't like what he's teaching and how he's teaching it and what it all means. And so it's about the Sabbath. That seems to somehow be something of the trigger for them today. And there's some fairness there. God bless the Pharisees. We paint them always with kind of the broad brush of being the villains of the story, right? The ones who are kind of making trouble for Jesus as he goes to spread his ministry out and about into the world. But if you take another look at who the Pharisees were, they're not villains. They're deeply, deeply faithful people who have been living by the law that has been their grounding for centuries. And so in this case, they're going to sort of some of the original understandings of the Sabbath. They're going to the 10 Commandments and saying we're supposed to honor the Sabbath. They're going to the example of wandering in the wilderness when God provided 2 days worth of manna for them on the 6th day so they wouldn't have to work on the 7th. The whole concept of honoring the Sabbath was deeply ingrained in the culture. So much so that it was kind of like layers upon layers of what does it mean to not work? had been built upon it. And there's lots of commentary about how the layers of rules had been built one upon another over time, that it's not just that we don't start a fire, is even picking up the match to consider starting a fire considered work. These layers were, these questions were asked, these layers had been built, and the Pharisees were the ones who were to keep people on kind of that straight and narrow path. So along Jesus comes, Jesus who observes the law and then kind of looks at it from this other vantage point. Indeed, we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, but David is, King David, our very example, who when his people were hungry, went into the temple, into the Holy of Holies, took that bread to feed his people. He wasn't tied to the law. He was showing mercy by feeding his people. The disciples were hungry. They plucked grains to eat because they were hungry, following that example of another vantage point on that law. We're not supposed to act or work on the Sabbath, so healing someone would be considered an act of work. So Jesus kind of gets around this, some commentators say, because he doesn't actually touch him to heal him. He says, "Stretch out your hand," and the man is healed. But they kind of know that the Pharisees then don't really know what to do with that. What is he doing? Why is he doing this? Why is he kind of pulling people away from our traditional view of how we're supposed to live that has worked so well for us for so long? They're outraged. They're not just outraged, they feel rage that he's pulling people to this different viewpoint. Anybody ever been there? Anybody ever felt like, what are they talking about? No, it's this way, not that way. Come on, right? We've been there. These are the moments we have to realize we're following Jesus, but we have a lot of similarities with our friends the Pharisees too, because they, like us, are just humans trying to do the best that we can in a world where there are a lot of laws, a lot of rules. In our family systems, in our nation, in our world, in our religion. And some of those laws and rules and whatnot in all those different places, some of them make perfect sense to us and they're easy for us to keep. And probably those are slightly different for everybody. Then there are some that are a little muddier to us for different reasons. And again, those are all different for everybody. And when you run up against someone who has a more muddy interpretation of something that's very clear to you, how does that feel? Icky. Good word. I like that. It feels icky, right? Let's go there. Why does it feel icky to us? What happens in us that feeling happens? What happens in us? It's those. You want to keep going? Right? That's good. I know. Come on, Deb. I love it. It goes to that place, right? Of now, wait a minute. Threatened. That sense of, wait a minute. Now this is what I thought I knew to be true. Why isn't that true for you? Why is there a negotiation for somebody else when it's so true to me? We feel threatened. And we have to, I think the invitation today is to delve into that place, to figure out what means so much to us, what means less to us, and what it can mean for us that we all have different interpretations of all of those things. That there also is room for there to be different interpretations by so many different people. we can look at it two different examples to kind of carry this along. We have speed limits posted around town, right? I see a 55, that looks like a 62 to me, you know. Others that looks like a 55, and to some people it looks like a 50, right? So we all, if there's law enforcement in the house, you know, it's just hyperbole, don't worry. But we interpret for ourselves, right? That's a law, and we interpret how that best works. One of our 745ers pointed out we have church law called canons. Canons are the church rules and laws. And he's actually an attorney for the church. And so he said, how about Canon 1, Article 16, which is all about only baptized Christians shall receive communion. That's still canonical law in the Episcopal Church. And our bishop has given us permission because it's a conversation that's happening all around the church for each parish to make their own decision about whether they're going to observe that canon in that light or they're going to have an open table like we at St. Barnabas do. We have a different theological approach that allows for us to invite all and any who gather here to come and receive Holy Communion. And there are some parishes where only baptized Christians are going to receive Holy Communion. And there's nothing wrong with either of those positions, or anything in between for that matter. And so for us to go into those things that mean a lot to us, the rules and laws that really, they feel strong and locked in our lives, and examine them. Why are they important to us? The things that get us riled up when other people don't observe, why? What is it? And for each of us, it's going to be different. Whether it's our upbringing or something we were taught in school or the way we've seen other people interact or other churches have been, all of us have reasons why we hold dear what we hold dear. And again, they're different for everyone. And so for us to go into that place of self-examination, to realize when those feelings of feeling threatened or whatever come up, what is that? And to take these kind of 2 steps back and say, what's happening in me? What's happening in me that this feels bad? This makes me feel afraid or vulnerable or angry or filled with rage. What is that, and where is that coming from? Now, that's not easy work, and those aren't easy questions, because those feelings of vulnerability can just take over and kind of start driving the bus. And so it's those moments where we kind of come again and again back to a center that's even deeper than those places. The center that says, regardless of how I feel about any rule or law of the church or the nation or the whatever, that I'm grounded in God. I can ask these questions because my identity is in God, not in all these other things. I can explore, and it's still safe. I'm still okay, because this is where I belong, in the deepest part of my soul where God is. And then we have room. We have room to look at our life and our story and other people's lives and other people's stories, and hear one another, why different things are important to others, why other things are less important to them. And that dialogue begins where there's room. There's room for you, and there's room for me. And maybe there's just a bit more peace made in the world because we've made some room. And we all bring our wounds. We all get driven out of our wounds, the things that have hurt us over time. the things that have broken our hearts over time. And we have to own and acknowledge that sometimes that's what's driving us. And sometimes that's what's driving other people. The Pharisees were not bad. They were not bad people. They felt humiliated and confused and vulnerable by Jesus taking everything they held dear and giving a new view on it. Not disobeying it blatantly, but giving it this different view. I have this fondness for that wound in them because it's our wound too. We have all been there. We've all had that instantaneous rage reaction to someone or something. And so again, it's that breath. What's happening in me? What's happening in me? Because I think that breath is what's going to perhaps make the story's ending a little bit different next time. The story of the Pharisees deciding that they needed to destroy Jesus led to the destruction of Jesus, led to his death. Can we find a way to prevent future death? Can we take a breath and let it lead to new life? Amen.